Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking the American Civil Rights Movement and reframing it completely. We're moving it beyond that traditional story we all know. And instead, we're viewing it through the really harsh, calculating lens of Cold War geopolitics, specifically from, 1945 to 1991. Our mission here is to see how that global rivalry actually shaped the fight for domestic justice.
And the whole deep dive really boils down to one central idea. It's called interest convergence.
Interest convergence.
Yeah. The thinking is that the federal government really moved on civil rights, not just out of a sudden moral awakening. I mean, that was part of it for some people, but the primary driver was foreign policy.
So winning the ideological battle.
Exactly. Winning the hearts and minds of all these newly decolonizing nations in Asia and Africa. Suddenly, the persistence of segregation, Jim Crow, it became a massive national security liability.
So the hypocrisy wasn't just embarrassing anymore. It was a strategic weakness. Okay, so where do we first see this pressure actually translate into action?
Well, it starts right after World War II. You have Black veterans coming home demanding the double V, right? Victory abroad, but also victory over racism at home.
And they were met with just horrible, violent backlash.
They were. And the Soviet Union, I mean, they instantly saw this vulnerability. They aggressively marketed communism as, the true anti-imperialist movement. They were broadcasting images of lynchings, whites-only signs all over the world.
Directly challenging the very legitimacy of American democracy.
It was potent propaganda. And that pressure, that global pressure, became the driver for policy changes that just seemed impossible before.
Like Executive Order 9981.
Exactly. In 1948, desegregating the armed forces. Military necessity drove that. Planners needed an efficient, unified fighting force for global power projection. And, with the Korean War looming, a segregated military was just a logistical nightmare.
And you see the same logic, the same language, even at the highest levels. The Supreme Court.
Oh, absolutely.
In Brown v. Board of Education in '54, the Department of Justice's own brief to the court, it explicitly says segregation gives, and I'm quoting here, grist for the communist propaganda mills.
It's right there in black and white. And then you get to Little Rock in 1957. Those images of white mobs attacking Black students, that wasn't just a domestic crisis.
It was a global optics catastrophe.
A complete disaster. It forced Eisenhower's hand. He sent in the 101st Airborne not just to enforce the Constitution, but to protect American prestige.
Okay, so let's pivot, because this was a double-edged sword, wasn't it?
A huge one.
While the Cold War forced the U.S. to address racial discrimination, anti-communism was used at the same time to crush any kind of class-based critique.
Right, and this is the crucial part. The Red Scare successfully decoupled the civil rights struggle from, say, economic redistribution or socialism. Mm-hmm. If you connected racial justice to challenging U.S. foreign policy or capitalism, you were suppressed. Ruthlessly.
Can you give us a concrete example of that?
Paul Robeson, the famous singer and activist. His passport was revoked in 1950. Why? Because he publicly criticized the idea of waging war against the USSR.
And W.E.B. Du Bois, too.
Indicted as an unregistered foreign agent, the message was crystal clear. Demand legal rights, that's acceptable now. But challenge the American economic and political system, that was seen as treasonous.
And that surveillance evolves into COINTELPRO, the FBI's program. It's just wild that J. Edgar Hoover saw something like the Black Panther Party's Free Breakfast for Children program as a threat.
He did. Because in his mind, they were winning the hearts and minds of the community. He saw it as a competing power structure. So after the big legislative wins of the mid-'60s, the mechanism of racial control, it didn't just vanish, it shifted.
From formal segregation to what?
To criminalization, under the nice-sounding banner of law and order.
Which takes us right into the Nixon era, the war on drugs. That transition is just chilling.
It is. And we know it was deliberate. John Ehrlichman, Nixon's domestic policy advisor, he admitted it years later. He said the war on drugs was designed to disrupt two groups, the anti-war left and Black communities.
By criminalizing them.
Yes. And it moved the whole political focus away from structural reform and economic justice.
And the Supreme Court helped lock this in place, right, with Milliken v. Bradley in 1974.
That was the nail in the coffin for widespread school integration. The court basically said suburban districts didn't have to integrate with city districts. It effectively entrenched the educational apartheid between cities and suburbs that we still see today.
So if we purr back, the Cold War was this strange catalyst. It ended legal, de jure segregation, But at the same time, it was a constraint that destroyed the movement's more radical economic wings.
It's the perfect double-edged sword. So when the Soviet Union finally dissolved in 1991, that external pressure on the U.S. to, fix its own house, it just evaporated.
And we were left with formal legal equality, but these deep structural economic gaps.
The unfinished business. Although it is worth noting one thing. In 1986, Congress overrode Reagan's veto of the Anti-Apartheid Act against South Africa.
I remember that.
That was a rare moment where a domestic moral consensus actually challenged and beat the Cold War security calculus.
So with that Cold War imperative long gone, we're left with a final question for you to think about. What new pressures, either external or domestic, will be necessary today to finally compel real action on that remaining structural inequality?